Batman Gotham's Knight, Volume 3, Number 6, Panopticon, Part 4, Earth 1 Saga. 1 Gods, Monsters, and Mortals, Part 1, Mortals 2. Gotham was quiet tonight. Not peaceful. Quiet. There was a difference. Batman crouched on the edge of a rooftop overlooking the docks. He had been there for hours. His binoculars were trained on an old warehouse across the street. Tonight, Penguin's men were supposed to meet with members of Black Mask's organization and the Red Hood gang. Batman had heard enough about the meeting to know it mattered. What he didn't know was exactly what they were planning. So he waited and waited. The wind blew across the rooftop. Batman barely moved. His ribs still hurt. His arm was still recovering. His body was still carrying the damage from KG Beast and Copperhead. But he was getting better. And while he healed, he had decided to focus on something he had been neglecting: Gotham itself. The crimes that didn't involve Black Mask, the criminals who weren't assassins, the ordinary people being robbed, attacked, and killed while Batman was busy chasing bigger threats. He had ignored too much. Now he was correcting that mistake. Batman lowered the binoculars. For a moment, his mind drifted. He remembered another time. Years ago, a much younger Bruce Wayne stood in a foreign city. He remembered the first time he had met Ra's al Ghul. The old man's presence had filled the room. Ra's had looked at Bruce as though he could see straight through him. "You seek to understand the darkness." Bruce remembered staring back. "I want to understand how criminals think." Ra's had smiled. "Then you must understand that criminals are not the darkness." Bruce remembered those words. Then the memory shifted. Bruce was back in Gotham. He remembered returning home after his years of training. Wayne Manor, Alfred, the Batcave, the city outside, and then another memory came. One from much earlier. A little boy sitting beside his father. Thomas Wayne had been holding a book. Bruce couldn't remember the title, but he remembered the picture. A strange creature with sharp claws. A creature called a Talon. Thomas had read the story to him. Bruce remembered looking at the illustration. "Is it real?" Thomas smiled. "Probably not." "Then why are you reading it?" "Because sometimes the best stories are the ones that scare us." Bruce remembered laughing. Then Thomas closed the book. "Just remember, Bruce." His father's voice echoed in his memory. "Monsters are usually just stories." The memory faded. Batman opened his eyes. He was back on the rooftop. He looked toward the warehouse. Not always. Movement. Batman immediately raised his binoculars. Cars were arriving. Penguin's men, Black Mask's men. Then the Red Hood gang. The meeting had begun. Batman stood. Finally, inside the warehouse, several criminals gathered around a table. One of the Red Hood members looked toward Penguin's men. "So what's the deal?" A Penguin lieutenant placed a briefcase on the table. "Firearms." The Red Hood member opened it. Inside were several guns. "Where'd you get these?" The Penguin lieutenant smiled. "You don't need to know." A Black Mask soldier looked at him. "We're supposed to be working together." "Then trust me." Batman watched from the rafters. He scanned the weapons. The serial numbers were partially filed away, but not completely. Batman downloaded what information he could. Then he saw something. A marking. Cobblepot Imports. Batman narrowed his eyes. Penguin? He had suspected it, but suspicion wasn't evidence. He needed something concrete, something that would hold up in court. Batman dropped from the rafters. Everyone looked up. "What the hell?" Batman landed in the middle of the table. The guns went flying. A Red Hood member charged. Batman ducked the punch and drove his elbow into the man's stomach. Another attacked. Batman grabbed him and threw him into the wall. A Black Mask soldier pulled a gun. Batman threw a batarang. The weapon flew from his hand. Batman moved through the room. One criminal after another fell. A Red Hood member swung a crowbar. Batman blocked it. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisted. The crowbar dropped. Batman kicked him into a stack of crates. Another criminal tried to escape. Batman fired his grappling gun. The cable wrapped around the man's legs. Batman pulled. The man crashed onto the floor. Within minutes, the warehouse was silent. Batman stood among the unconscious criminals. He looked at the guns. He picked one up. The markings were still there. Penguin's supply chain? But legally, not enough. Batman sighed. Not enough. He placed the weapon back down. He had the pieces, but he still needed the proof. He looked at the criminals. Penguin? Batman walked away. "You're getting closer." Later that night, Batman returned to the rooftops. He stopped. Another thought came to him. The thief. For days, he'd been tracking a thief who had been breaking into businesses across Gotham. He had found fingerprints, security footage, broken locks, but no identity. Nothing he could use, because he hadn't been looking hard enough. Black Mask had consumed his attention. The assassins had consumed his attention. Every time another criminal appeared, Batman had chased the bigger threat. Now he was finally looking at the rest of Gotham, and there was a lot to find. Batman looked over the city, one case at a time. He fired his grappling gun. The next day, Bruce Wayne sat across from a woman at a restaurant. Her name was Selina Kyle. Bruce took a sip of his drink. So, Selina smiled. So, how long have you lived in Gotham? Selina leaned back. Long enough, Bruce smiled. That's not very specific. You didn't ask a specific question. Bruce laughed. Selina smiled. You always this serious? Usually. That's unfortunate. Bruce laughed again. The date was going surprisingly well. For once, Bruce wasn't thinking about Gotham. Not Black Mask. Not Penguin. Not assassins. Not the Candy Killer. Not the bodies. Just Selina. For a little while. That night, Batman was back in Gotham. A Red Hood gang operation was taking place in an alley. Batman watched from above. One criminal handed another a weapon. Batman dropped down. The first criminal barely had time to react. Batman knocked him down. Another pulled a knife. Batman grabbed his wrist. Bad idea. He disarmed him. Another tried to run. Batman chased him across the alley. The criminal climbed a fire escape. Batman followed. The Red Hood member reached the rooftop. Batman was already there. The man froze. How? Batman punched him. He collapsed. Batman stood over him. You're going to tell me where the rest of your gang is. The man groaned. Batman looked toward the skyline. The city stretched out before him. Gotham was still dangerous, but Batman was beginning to see it differently. He wasn't just hunting Black Mask anymore. He was watching everything, every crime, every gang, every missing person, every murder, every thief, every corner. The entire city had become his responsibility. Batman fired his grappling gun. As he disappeared into the darkness, one thought remained in his mind. Nothing gets past me anymore. To be continued.
That normally helps.
Tash Adam,
Okay.
Batman Gotham's Night,
Last time I
Volume 3,
walked
Number
back
7,
that way, it wasn't
Panopticon,
open.
Part 5, Earth 1 Saga. 1. God's Monsters and Mortals, Part 1. Mortals. December had arrived in Gotham. The city was colder, the nights were longer, and Christmas was only a few days away. Batman stood on a rooftop overlooking the city. He looked at the lights decorating the streets. People were preparing for Christmas. Families were shopping. Children were waiting for presents. For a moment, Bruce allowed himself to think about something other than crime. Just a few more days. He wanted Black Mask finished before Christmas. After everything that had happened, the assassins, KG Beast, Copperhead, Penguin, the Red Hood gang, Bruce wanted Roman Sionis behind bars before the holiday arrived. Then his police scanner interrupted him. Batman immediately focused. Units responding to an armed operation in the financial district. Batman looked toward the skyline. Another night. He fired his grappling gun. Batman landed on the roof of a warehouse. Below him was an operation belonging to Rupert Thorne. Several men were moving crates through the building. Batman watched him for a few seconds. Then he dropped. The first thug barely had time to turn around. Batman hit him. Another pulled a gun. Batman threw a batarang. The weapon flew across the room. A third thug charged. Batman sidestepped him and slammed him into a crate. Where's Thorne? Nobody answered. Batman grabbed one of the men by his jacket. Where? The man pointed toward an office. Batman threw him down and walked inside. Rupert Thorne was standing behind a desk. He looked up. You! Batman stared at him. Rupert Thorne. Thorne slowly smiled. Well, this is unfortunate. Batman grabbed him. Thorne's men rushed into the office. Batman turned. Within seconds, they were all on the floor. Thorne looked around. You think this changes anything? No. Batman grabbed Thorne by the collar. It changes tonight. Thorne was taken down, but Batman wasn't finished. He discovered that the operation had been connected to another member of the Thorne family. Bradford Thorne. Known in Gotham's criminal world as Crime Doctor, Bradford had been using his medical knowledge to help criminals who didn't want to go to hospitals. Bullet wounds, knife wounds, broken bones, he patched them up. Batman tracked him to an underground medical facility. Bradford looked up as Batman entered. "You're ruining my business." Batman walked toward him. "Your patients are criminals." Bradford picked up a surgical instrument. "And?" Batman disarmed him. "You're done." Bradford attacked. Batman blocked him and slammed him against the operating table. A few minutes later, Crime Doctor was restrained. Batman looked around the room. Another criminal operation dismantled. But he knew there were still bigger problems. Black Mask. Later that evening, Batman was moving across Gotham when his police scanner came alive. Then he heard Renee Montoya's voice. "Dispatch, this is Montoya. We need someone down here immediately." Batman stopped. Her voice sounded different, more serious. "What's the situation?" There was a pause. Multiple victims. Batman immediately changed direction. He arrived at the crime scene. A family was dead. A family that should have been preparing for Christmas. Instead, they were lying around their dining table. Batman entered carefully. He examined the food. Pie. He scanned it. Poison. Batman looked toward the bodies. Montoya arrived shortly afterward. "Batman?" He looked at her. "What happened?" "They ate the pie." Batman scanned the table. Poisoned. Montoya looked sick. "Who would do this?" Batman didn't answer. He was already investigating. He found traces of the poison. No forced entry. No obvious struggle. Someone had wanted these people to eat it. Batman looked at the pie. Then he remembered something. December. Pie. National Pie Day. December 1st in some areas. The date was already passed, but it was close enough to be intentional. Batman looked toward Montoya. "This wasn't random." Montoya frowned. "What do you mean?" "Someone chose the pie." Batman stood. They wanted the holiday connection. Later that day, Batman found another criminal operation. 3 men were robbing a jewelry store. Batman entered. The 3 criminals turned toward him. One had a fox-like mask, another carried a shark-themed weapon, the third wore wings. Batman stared at them. The terrible trio. Fox laughed. "You've heard of us, unfortunately." The fight began. Shark charged. Batman jumped over him. Vulture attacked from above. Batman fired a batarang. Vulture crashed into a display case. Fox pulled a gun. Batman knocked it away. The 3 criminals tried to surround him. Batman moved faster. Fox went down first, then Shark. Vulture tried to escape through the roof. Batman fired his grappling gun. The cable wrapped around Vulture. Batman pulled him back. The 3 were finished. Batman looked at them, terrible. He walked away. Night fell. Batman was back on a rooftop. His police scanner suddenly came alive again. Montoya to dispatch. Batman listened. Another crime scene, another couple, another set of bodies. Batman immediately headed there. He arrived. A man and woman were dead inside their home. Batman examined the table. Apples. Red apples. He scanned them. Poison. Batman slowly stood. Again. Montoya arrived. She looked at the bodies. Oh God. Batman looked at the apples. This is connected. To the pie? Yes. Montoya looked confused. What does pie have to do with apples? Batman examined one of the apples. National Eat a Red Apple Day. Montoya stared at him. You're kidding. No. Batman looked around the room. Someone is using holidays. Montoya looked at the bodies. December. Exactly. Batman thought about the first crime. The pie. National Pie Day. December 1st. Now the apples. National Eat a Red Apple Day. The dates didn't make sense. They weren't following the calendar. They weren't following the holidays in order. Whoever was doing this wasn't simply celebrating holidays. They were choosing them. Batman looked toward the window. There's a killer out there. Montoya looked at him. What kind? Batman stared at the city. A holiday killer. He looked back at the poisoned apples. He's choosing holidays. Montoya shook her head. Why? Batman didn't know. But he knew one thing. This wasn't over. And Christmas was coming. Batman looked toward Gotham's Christmas lights glowing in the distance. For the first time that night, he wasn't thinking about Black Mask. He was thinking about every family in Gotham preparing to celebrate Christmas. If this killer is choosing holidays, Batman clenched his fist. Christmas might be next. He fired his grappling gun. Batman disappeared into the darkness, and below him, Gotham continued celebrating. Unaware that somewhere in the city, a killer was already choosing the next holiday. Batman Gotham's Knight, Volume 3, number 7.2. The Checkup Earth 1 Saga. 1 Gods, Monsters, and Mortals, Part 1, Mortals 2. The Batcave was quiet. The only sounds were the computers humming and the occasional drip of water somewhere in the darkness. Bruce sat at the Batcomputer. Photographs were spread across the screen. The family killed by poisoned pie. The couple killed by poisoned apples. The evidence, the food, the dates, the supposed holiday connections. Bruce stared at everything. Alfred walked down the stairs carrying a cup of coffee. He stopped beside Bruce. "Master Bruce, sir?" Bruce didn't look away from the monitor. "Yes, Alfred?" "How exactly did you know those murders were connected to holidays?" Bruce finally looked at him. "I don't fully know." Alfred raised an eyebrow. "You don't?" "No." Bruce turned back toward the computer. "I just have this feeling." Alfred looked at the evidence. "A feeling?" "Something about the way the crimes were committed." Bruce brought up the photographs of the pie. Nobody randomly poisons a family with a pie. Then he brought up the photographs of the apples. And nobody randomly poisons 2 people with red apples. Alfred nodded. "I suppose that is true." Bruce zoomed in on the evidence. "There's a pattern. But you don't know what the pattern is yet." "No." Bruce leaned back. "That's what's bothering me." Alfred looked at the screen. "And how do you know it's a man?" Bruce paused. "I don't." Alfred looked at him. Bruce sighed. "I don't really know that either." He looked back at the evidence. "It's just..." Bruce struggled to explain it. "It's a strange case, Alfred." He stood up. "A very strange case." Bruce walked toward the trophy room. "I've dealt with criminals who wanted money." He passed the evidence from Firefly. "Criminals who wanted revenge." He passed the evidence from Huntress. "Criminals who wanted power." He passed the evidence from Black Mask. "And criminals who just wanted to hurt people." He stopped. "The reason doesn't matter." Alfred followed him. "Because?" Bruce looked at the evidence. "Because whoever this is," he stared at the photographs, "I'm going to stop them." Alfred nodded. "And if the killer isn't a man," Bruce looked at him, "then I stop her. And if they're neither, I stop them." Alfred smiled slightly, quite determined. Bruce turned back toward the Batcomputer. "I don't care who it is." He sat down. "I don't care what gender they are." Bruce began typing. "I don't care what they are." The computer displayed the case file. Bruce stared at it. "It's a case." He looked toward Alfred. "And I tend to put a stop to cases like this." Alfred nodded. "Then perhaps you should start by getting some rest." Bruce ignored him. "Master Bruce?" "I'm fine. You've said that before." Bruce continued working. Alfred sighed. "I suppose there's no convincing you." Bruce looked at the evidence again. The poisoned pie, the poisoned apples, the holidays. Something was connecting them. He just couldn't see it yet. But he would. He always did. Bruce looked at the clock, then back at the case. "Christmas is coming." Alfred understood immediately. "And you're concerned it may be next?" Bruce nodded. "Yeah." He turned back toward the computer. "So let's find them before Christmas." The Batcomputer continued displaying the photographs. The Batcave remained silent. And somewhere in Gotham, the holiday killer was still out there. To be continued. Batman Gotham's Knight, Volume 3, Number 8, Panopticon, Part 6, Earth 1 Saga. 1 Gods, Monsters, and Mortals, Part 1, Mortals 2. Gotham was getting colder. December had settled over the city, and Christmas was getting closer every day. Batman stood on a rooftop overlooking the streets. His attention was on a man standing in the middle of an intersection. The man wore a strange crown-like helmet and a suit covered in armor. The police had given him a name, the Monarch of Menace. Batman watched him knock over a parked police cruiser. The Monarch of Menace laughed. "Come on, Batman, show me what you've got." Batman jumped from the rooftop. The Monarch just in time to block Batman's first punch. The impact sent both of them stumbling backward. "You're stronger than you look." Batman didn't answer. The Monarch charged. Batman dodged. The Monarch slammed into a wall. Batman grabbed him from behind. The Monarch elbowed him in the face. Batman staggered. The Monarch turned and landed another punch. Batman hit the ground. He quickly rolled away as the Monarch brought his foot down. Batman kicked his knee. The Monarch stumbled. Batman grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back. The Monarch fought against him. "You're going to have to do better." Batman tightened his grip. I am. Batman slammed him into the pavement. The monarch finally stopped moving. Batman pulled out his restraints. You're done. He tied him up and left him for the police. Later that night, Batman moved through another section of Gotham. This time, he was going after someone much more organized. Warren White. The criminal Gotham had begun calling Great White Shark. White had taken over a mob operation and was using legitimate businesses as fronts for money laundering, weapons trafficking, and extortion. Batman watched from above as several of White's men unloaded crates. He dropped down. The men immediately attacked. Batman moved through them quickly. One swung a pipe. Batman blocked it. Another tried to stab him. Batman disarmed him. A third pulled a gun. Batman threw a batarang. The gun flew across the room. Batman eventually reached Warren White. White looked nervous. Listen, Batman. Batman grabbed him. You're finished. White looked around at his defeated men. I can pay you. Batman stared at him. I'm not for sale. White was knocked unconscious moments later. Another Gotham operation was finished. Batman's police scanner suddenly picked up a familiar voice. Renee Montoya. She wasn't talking to him. She was talking to the other officers. Crime scene at Gotham Hamilton Hill Community College. Batman immediately changed direction. The college was quiet when Batman arrived. Too quiet. He entered through a broken window. The hallways were dark. Then he found the first body. A teacher. Then another. Then another. Several teachers had been killed. Batman slowly walked through the crime scene. On a desk was a note. Batman scanned it. His eyes narrowed. He brought up the calendar. National Special Education Day, December 2nd. Batman stared at the note. The pie. The apples. Now this. His suspicion was becoming something more. The killer wasn't simply choosing random holidays. They were deliberately choosing national holidays. Batman looked at the bodies. This is the pattern. He photographed the note. He didn't know who the killer was. He didn't know what they wanted. But now, he knew what they were doing. Montoya was driving through Gotham when her police communications suddenly came alive. A body had been discovered in the Park Row district. She immediately headed there. Batman was already moving. He reached Park Row first. A body was lying in the street. Batman approached. He began examining the scene. Then a figure dropped from above. Batman barely had time to turn. A knife slashed across his chest. Batman stumbled backward. The attacker landed in front of him. A man with wild eyes, a grotesque smile. Eduardo Flamingo. Batman recognized him, one of Black Mask's assassins and one of Gotham's most disturbing killers, a cannibal. Flamingo laughed. You smell delicious. Batman stared at him. You're sick. Flamingo charged. The fight was brutal. Flamingo was fast. He slashed at Batman repeatedly. Batman blocked one attack. Another blade tore through part of his suit. Batman grabbed Flamingo and threw him against a parked car. Flamingo immediately got back up. He laughed. Batman charged. Flamingo tried to stab him again. Batman caught his wrist. He twisted. The knife dropped. Batman punched him. Flamingo fell. Batman grabbed him by the collar. Who sent you? Flamingo smiled. You're going to have to kill me to find out. Batman slammed him against the car. I'm not a murderer. Flamingo attacked again. Batman finally knocked him unconscious. He stood over the assassin. His suit was damaged, but he was still standing. A few minutes later, Montoya arrived. She looked at Flamingo. Eduardo Flamingo. Batman nodded. One of Black Mask's. Montoya looked at the damage to Batman's suit. You okay? I'm fine. Montoya looked at him. You always say that. Batman didn't respond. Montoya called for officers. Flamingo was taken into custody and transported to Blackgate. Batman watched them leave. Another assassin was off the streets, but Black Mask was still free. Later that night, Batman was moving across Gotham again. He wasn't listening to the police dispatchers directly. He didn't speak to them. He knew the GCPD didn't trust him. Most of them still considered him a criminal. But he was still hacked into their communications. And he heard something. A strange report. Possible homicide. Batman stopped. He listened. A man had found a package on his front porch. He opened it. A spring-loaded knife had been hidden inside. The blade had shot forward and stabbed him directly in the eye. Batman immediately changed direction. He arrived at the house. The police had already secured the area. Batman watched from a nearby rooftop. He didn't approach the officers. He didn't want them seeing him. Instead, he studied the house from a distance. Then he looked at the package. The mechanism, the placement, the date, December 3rd. Batman brought up the calendar, National Package Protection Day. Batman stared at the screen. His suspicion was now confirmed. The killer was using national holidays. Not Christmas, not Thanksgiving, not Halloween, national holidays, obscure ones. Holidays most people probably didn't even know existed. Batman looked toward Gotham, the pie, the apples, Special Education Day, Package Protection Day. They were connected. Someone was turning obscure national holidays into murder scenes. Batman fired his grappling gun. As he flew between the buildings, he thought about everything that was still happening. Black Mask, the assassins, the holiday killer, Penguin, the Red Hood gang, the criminals he hadn't caught yet. Christmas was coming. Batman landed on another rooftop. He looked toward the Wayne Manor district. He thought about Alfred. Alfred would probably want him home for Christmas. He could already imagine him saying it. Master Bruce, you can't spend Christmas alone in the Batcave. Bruce almost smiled. Christmas ham. He shook his head. Not if I can help it. He looked toward Gotham. He wanted Black Mask gone. He wanted the assassins gone. And now he wanted the holiday killer stopped before another person died. Batman pulled his cape around himself. I've got to find them. He fired the grappling gun again. Batman disappeared into the night. Behind him, Gotham's Christmas lights continued to shine. But somewhere in the city, someone was already looking at another national holiday and another potential victim. To be continued. Batman, Gotham's Night, Volume 3, Number 9, Panopticon, Part 7, Earth 1 Saga. 1. Gods, Monsters, and Mortals, Part 1, Mortals 2, Mortals 2.2. Gotham was alive tonight. Music poured into the streets from a nightclub called What a Way to Go-Go. Batman stood across the street on a rooftop watching the entrance. He had been tracking a group of criminals for the past few nights. They had been moving weapons and stolen goods through several clubs around Gotham. Tonight, they were meeting here. Batman lowered his binoculars. Time to go. He jumped from the roof. Inside the nightclub, music blasted through the building. Criminals crowded around tables. One man handed another a package. That's everything. Good. Then the lights suddenly went out. The music stopped. Everyone looked around. A voice came from the darkness. Nobody move. The lights came back on. Batman stood in the middle of the room. One of the criminals pulled a gun. Batman threw a batarang. The gun flew away. Another criminal charged. Batman ducked and knocked him over the bar. Two more attacked him at once. Batman blocked one punch and kicked the other into a table. Then he heard something. Electricity. A familiar sound. ZZT. Batman looked toward the entrance. Electrocutioner stepped into the room. Miss me? Batman stared at him. You again. Electrocutioner smiled. You didn't think we'd forgotten about each other, did you? He raised his electrical weapon. Batman moved. A bolt of electricity hit the wall behind him. Batman rolled across the floor. Electrocutioner fired again. Batman jumped over a table. Come on. Electrocutioner chased him. You've been a pain in my ass for too long. Batman grabbed a metal chair and threw it. Electrocutioner blasted it with electricity. Batman used the distraction to get behind him. He struck Electrocutioner's arm. The weapon fell. Electrocutioner turned. Batman punched him. Electrocutioner staggered. Batman kicked him into the wall. Electrocutioner tried to get back up. Batman grabbed him. You're finished. Electrocutioner laughed. Black Mask is going to? Batman slammed him against the wall. Black Mask isn't here. Electrocutioner tried to reach for another weapon. Batman kicked it away. Then Batman delivered one final punch. Electrocutioner dropped. Batman restrained him. The criminals inside the nightclub stared at him. Batman looked around. Anyone else? Nobody moved. Good. Batman walked away. Later that night, Batman was moving through Gotham when his communication device beeped. He answered. Montoya. Renee's voice came through. Batman. What's wrong? I need you at the Gotham City Zoo. Batman stopped. The zoo? Just get here. Her voice sounded serious. Batman immediately changed direction. The Gotham City Zoo was surrounded by police. Batman landed on the roof of one of the buildings. He looked down. Montoya was standing near the entrance. She looked exhausted. Batman approached. What happened? Montoya looked toward the zoo. Animals. Batman frowned. What kind of animals? All kinds. She hesitated. They're dead. Batman entered. The zoo was almost completely silent. No roaring, no birds, no sounds from the cages. Only silence. Batman walked past one enclosure. A dead animal lay inside, then another, then another. He examined the bodies. Poison, chemical traces. He continued deeper into the zoo. There were more. Much more. Batman found something attached to one of the cages. A note. He carefully removed it. Batman scanned it. His eyes narrowed. Another holiday. December 4th. Wildlife Conservation Day. Batman stared at the note. He finally had the confirmation he needed. The killer wasn't simply choosing random dates. They were deliberately choosing national holidays. Pie, apples, special education, package protection, and now wildlife conservation. Batman looked around at the dead animals. The pattern was undeniable. Montoya walked over. "What does it say?" Batman handed her the note. She read it. Wildlife Conservation Day. Batman nodded. December 4th. Montoya looked at the dead animals. "So this is the same killer?" "Yes." Batman looked toward the city. "Definitely." Montoya looked at him. "You think they're gonna keep doing this?" Batman didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Until when?" Batman looked at the calendar on his device. December. Christmas was approaching. He thought about Alfred, the manor, the Christmas decorations, the possibility of actually spending Christmas at home. Then he looked back at the dead animals. No matter what holiday they choose. Batman folded the note. "I'll be there." Montoya nodded. Batman walked to the exit. She watched him leave. "Batman!" He stopped. Montoya looked at him. "Be careful." Batman looked back. "I always am." He disappeared into the darkness. Montoya sighed. "That's not what I've heard." Batman stood on a rooftop overlooking Gotham. He looked down at the Christmas decorations scattered throughout the city. Another case had been solved. Another assassin had been taken down. Another criminal operation had been stopped. But the holiday killer was still out there. And the killer wasn't finished. Batman looked at the note one last time. December 4th. Wildlife Conservation Day. He closed his fist around it. "Find me." The wind blew across the rooftop. Batman disappeared into the darkness. And with that night, Mortals Part 2 ended. A new chapter of Gotham's story was beginning. Mortals Part 2.2. And somewhere in Gotham, the holiday killer was already preparing for the next day. To be continued.
Oh, Sonny. Oh.
Blackgate Interviews, Volume 2, Number 3, The Candy Killer, Blackgate Prison, Interview Room. Dr. Harleen Quinzel sat across from the prisoner. A file rested on the table in front of her. She opened it. Name, Sweetie Todd, alias Sweet, known as the Candy Killer. Victims, multiple children and adults. Status, incarcerated. Harleen looked through the file for a few seconds. Dr. Leslie Tompkins is taking a break today, so you're stuck with me. Like Sweetie Todd sat completely still. He was a heavy-set man with an unsettling smile. Harleen studied him. "You poisoned cotton candy?" "Nothing. You poisoned other candy too." Sweetie slowly looked at her. Harleen leaned forward. "And you killed children." Sweetie smiled. "They loved candy." Harleen frowned. "That's what you're going with?" Sweetie shrugged. "Everybody loves candy." "That's not an answer. It is to me." Harleen wrote something down. "So why cotton candy?" Sweetie looked toward the corner of the room. "It's soft." Harleen waited. "It's sweet." He smiled again. "And it disappears." Harleen stopped writing. "Disappears? You put it in your mouth?" Sweetie slowly moved his fingers like something dissolving, and then it's gone. Harleen stared at him. "And the poison?" Sweetie smiled. "Nobody notices." Harleen's expression hardened. "You knew exactly what you were doing." "Of course. Why children?" Sweetie didn't answer immediately. Harleen waited. Finally, he said, "They trust candy." Harleen closed the file. "That's enough." Sweetie laughed quietly. Harleen stood. "You know, Leslie thinks some of the people in this prison need psychiatric treatment." Sweetie looked at her. "I think she's right." Harleen walked toward the door. Then Sweetie spoke. "Doctor?" Harleen stopped. "Yes?" Sweetie smiled. "When I get out?" Harleen turned around. "You aren't getting out." Sweetie began laughing. Not loudly, just a quiet, unsettling laugh. Harleen looked at him for another moment before leaving the room. The guards entered and escorted Sweetie Todd back toward his cell. Harleen watched him disappear down the hallway. She looked down at her notes. Then she wrote one final sentence. Subject demonstrates complete awareness of his actions and shows no remorse for the victims. She closed the file. And for the first time since meeting him, Harleen wasn't thinking about whether Sweetie Todd could be rehabilitated. She was wondering whether someone like him could ever be trapped outside a prison cell. Blackgate Interviews, Volume 2, Number 4, Candyman, Blackgate Prison Interview Room. Dr. Jonathan Crane sat across from Sweetie Todd. The room was quiet. Sweetie Todd sat in the chair with his hands restrained in front of him. Crane placed a folder on the table. He looked at the prisoner for several seconds. Sweetie Todd. Sweetie smiled. Candy. Crane raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? Candy. Crane opened the folder. Your name is Sweetie Todd. You're also known as Sweet Tooth and the Candy Killer. Candy. Crane stared at him. Yes, candy. Sweetie smiled. Do you have any? No. Why not? Because you're in prison. Sweetie frowned. That's not fair. Crane leaned forward. Do you know why you're here? Candy. No, you're here because you poisoned Candy and killed people. Sweetie shrugged. Candy. Crane sighed. Fine. He pulled out a notebook. I've been studying the other prisoners here. Sweetie looked at him. And they're afraid of something. Sweetie said nothing. Everyone is afraid of something. Crane leaned closer. Some are afraid of death. Some are afraid of being powerless. Some are afraid of being forgotten. Sweetie stared at him. Crane stopped. You really can't think about anything else? I can think about chocolate. Crane blinked. Chocolate? Chocolate. Anything else? Gummy worms. Crane wrote something down. Anything else? Caramel. Anything else? Licorice. Crane slowly lowered his pen. You understand what I'm asking you, don't you? Sweetie smiled. Sure. Then tell me what scares you. Sweetie looked at him. For a moment, Crane thought he might actually answer. Then, no candy, stared at him. What? No candy. Sweetie looked genuinely disturbed for the first time. When there's no candy. Crane leaned forward. That's what you're afraid of? Sweetie nodded. No candy. Nothing else? No. Not death? No. Not prison? No. Not Batman? Sweetie shrugged. Batman. Crane watched his reaction carefully. There was almost nothing. Then he asked, what about being alone? Sweetie shook his head. What about pain? No. What about being caught? No. What about the people you've killed? Sweetie smiled. No. Crane slowly closed his notebook. So the only thing you can think about is candy. Sweetie nodded. I want candy. Crane looked at him. You've killed people for candy. Sweetie corrected him. I killed people with candy. Crane stared at him. That's not better. Sweetie smiled. I know. Crane stood. He gathered his papers. Sweetie suddenly spoke again. Doctor?
I'll
Crane
check
stopped.
you here in
Yes?
a minute.
Sweetie looked at him. Do you have any candy? Crane stared at him. No. Sweetie's smile disappeared. I want candy. Crane walked toward the door. You'll have to learn to live without it. Sweetie watched him leave. As the door closed, Crane stood outside the interview room. He looked down at his notes. Subject's greatest apparent fear, deprivation of candy. Crane frowned. This isn't a fear. He looked back through the window at Sweetie. It's an obsession. Inside the room, Sweetie Todd sat quietly. Then he whispered to himself, Candy. He smiled. Candy. Blackgate Interviews, Volume 2, Number 5, The Thorne Brothers, Blackgate Prison, Interview Room. Dr. Leslie Tompkins sat across from Bradford Thorne. The file in front of her was relatively thin. Name, Bradford Thorne. Crime doctor. Occupation, former physician. Crimes, organized crime, illegal medical activity, assisting criminal operations. Bradford sat calmly in his chair. Leslie opened the file. Dr. Bradford Thorne. Bradford smiled faintly. I haven't been called doctor in a while. You've been using your medical knowledge to help criminals. I was helping patients. Patients. People came to me injured. I treated them. Criminals. Bradford shrugged. Doctors aren't supposed to ask too many questions. Leslie looked at him. That's not how medical ethics work. Bradford smiled. Ethics are a luxury. Leslie closed the file for a moment. Your brother is Rupert Thorne. Bradford's expression changed slightly. Yes. He's a major crime boss in Gotham. My brother is a businessman. Leslie almost laughed. That's what you're calling him? That's what he calls himself. And you? Bradford looked at his hands. I suppose I'm the family doctor. Crime doctor. He looked back at her. If that's what Gotham wants to call me. Leslie leaned forward. Do you regret what you've done? Bradford thought about it. I regret getting caught. Leslie sighed. That's not the same thing. I know. There was a knock on the door. A guard entered. Dr. Tompkins? Leslie looked up. Yes? There's someone here to see Dr. Thorne. Bradford smiled. That'll be my brother. A short time later, Leslie watched through the glass as Rupert Thorne entered the prison. Rupert was dressed in an expensive suit. He carried himself like a man who had never been afraid of being arrested. He approached the desk. Mr. Thorne, Rupert smiled. I'm here for my brother. The paperwork has already been processed. Leslie looked surprised. Already? Rupert adjusted his coat. Lawyers work quickly. Bradford was brought out of the interview room. He looked at his brother. Rupert, Bradford. The two brothers shook hands. Rupert looked toward Leslie. Doctor. Leslie nodded. Mr. Thorne? Rupert turned back toward his brother. Let's go. Bradford followed him. Before leaving, Bradford looked back at Leslie. She watched him disappear through the prison doors. Leslie stood there silently. She knew what Rupert's money and influence could do. Bradford Thorne was free, and she suspected he wouldn't stay away from Gotham's criminal world for long. Blackgate Interviews, Volume 2 Terrible Trio, Blackgate Prison, Juvenile Interview Room. Dr. Harleen Quinzel sat across from the three young criminals. They were sitting together, though none of them looked particularly happy about being there. Their files were placed in front of Harleen. The terrible trio, Fox, Shark, Vulture. Harleen looked at the three of them. Okay, let's start with the obvious question. Fox leaned back. What? Why? Shark frowned. Why what? Why dress up like animals and rob people? Vulture shrugged. It sounded cool. Harleen stared at him. That's it? Pretty much. Harleen looked down at her notes. You're all juveniles. Fox smirked. We know. And you attacked people. We didn't kill anybody. That doesn't make what you did okay. Shark looked away. We know. Harleen looked at Fox. You're the Fox? Yeah. Why a fox? Smart. Sneaky. Fast. She looked at Shark. And you? Shark. Obviously. Shark smiled. And Vulture? Vulture shrugged. I like the idea. Harleen sighed. You three realize you could have seriously hurt someone? Fox looked down. Yeah. Or gotten yourselves killed. Nobody answered. Harleen closed the file. You know, I expected something more complicated. Fox looked at her. What do you mean? I've interviewed murderers, arsonists, assassins, mobsters. She looked at the three teenagers. And then there's you three. Vulture smiled. We're special. Harleen shook her head. You're teenagers who made some very bad decisions. Shark looked at her. So what's going to happen to us? Harleen glanced toward the guard standing outside. That's not entirely up to me. The guard entered the room. Doctor? Harleen turned. What is it? The court approved their release. Fox's eyes widened. Seriously? The guard nodded. Because of their age and the circumstances surrounding their arrests, they're being released into juvenile supervision. Vulture stood. So we're free? Under supervision. Shark looked relieved. Fox looked at Harleen. Does that mean we're not going to Blackgate? Harleen smiled slightly. It means you three get another chance. Vulture looked at Fox. Come on. The three began walking toward the door. Harleen stopped them. Wait. They turned around. She looked at each of them. Don't waste it. Fox nodded. Yeah. Shark nodded. Vulture gave a small smile. We won't. The three teenagers were escorted out. Harleen watched them leave. She looked down at her notes. Underneath their names, she wrote, Juvenile offenders, released early under supervision. Recommend continued counseling and monitoring. She closed the file. For once, Harleen was glad to see an interview end with someone walking out of Blackgate instead of being locked inside it. The door closed behind the terrible trio, and the three young criminals were free. For now.
But she's right, but I can hear her.
Blackgate Interviews, Volume 2, Number 6.2, the Monarch
Well,
of
unless
Menace,
it's the
Blackgate
cave is
Prison,
in the
interview
house. I
room.
think she maybe
Dr.
is leaving
Harleen
out of the
Quinzel
room.
sat across from the newest inmate. She opened the file. Name unknown. Alias, the Monarch of Menace. Status, incarcerated. Harleen looked at him. Well, you're certainly not the strangest person I've interviewed. The Monarch of Menace smiled. That's disappointing. Harleen raised an eyebrow. You wanted to be the strangest? I wanted to be unforgettable. Harleen picked up her pen. Let's start simple. Who are you? The Monarch of Menace. That's not your name. It is now. Harleen sighed. Fine, why the costume? Because ordinary men are forgotten, and you don't want to be forgotten. Exactly. Harleen wrote something down. You attacked people, robbed businesses, caused property damage. Menace. What? That's what I am. Harleen stared at him. A menace? He smiled. The Monarch of Menace. She shook her head. Do you actually believe you're some kind of king? Not some kind. What kind? The kind who doesn't need a crown. Harleen leaned back. So you're looking for attention. The Monarch's smile faded slightly. I'm looking for respect. There's a difference. Not in Gotham. Harleen paused. That's an interesting statement. The city respects power. And you think you're powerful? I fought Batman. Harleen looked down at the file and lost. The Monarch of Menace stared at her. Harleen smiled. Sorry. He leaned forward. You think this is funny? No. You're laughing. I'm smiling. Why? Because you're sitting in Blackgate telling me how powerful you are. The Monarch said nothing. Harleen continued. You're not a king here. She pointed toward the door. You're a prisoner. He looked away. Harleen closed the file. Do you regret what you did? No. Do you regret getting caught? A pause. Yes. Harleen nodded. That's what I thought. She stood up. The Monarch looked at her. Doctor. Harleen stopped. Yes. Tell Batman. She waited. The Monarch isn't finished. Harleen smiled. I'll be sure to put that in the report. She walked out. The door closed. The Monarch of Menace sat alone in the interview room. For the first time since arriving at Blackgate, he wasn't smiling. He looked at the mirror, then quietly whispered to himself, Kings always return.
The
Blackgate Interviews, Volume 2, Number 6.3, The Great White Blackgate Prison, Interview Room. Dr. Harleen Quinzel sat across from Warren White. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by a prison uniform, but he still carried himself like a wealthy businessman. Harleen opened his file. Name, Warren White. Alias, Great White Shark. Crimes, organized crime, fraud, extortion, money laundering, racketeering. Harleen looked at him. So Warren White. White smiled. Doctor, you're also known as the Great White Shark. I've been called worse. Why the name? White leaned back. Because sharks survive. Even when they're caught? He smiled. Especially then. Harleen looked through his file. You ran a criminal operation in Gotham. I ran a business. You threatened people. Business negotiations. You extorted people. Business negotiations. You committed crimes. White shrugged. Allegedly. Harleen sighed. You're not gonna make this easy, are you? I've never had to. Because you're rich. White smiled. Because I'm smart. Harleen closed the file. Let's talk about Gotham. Go ahead. You've been operating here for a while. You've seen what happens to people who get involved with the wrong crowd. White nodded. That's Gotham. Doesn't it bother you? What? That people get hurt. White looked at her. Doctor, people get hurt everywhere. That's your excuse? It's reality. Harleen stared at him. Do you regret anything? White thought about it. No. Not even getting caught? White smiled. That's temporary. Harleen raised an eyebrow. Really? Before White could answer, there was a knock on the door. A guard entered. Dr. Quinzel. What? We've received new paperwork. White smiled. Harleen looked at the guard. What kind of paperwork? Warren White's release has been approved. Harleen stared at him. Already? The guard nodded. His legal team handled it. White stood up. I told you. Harleen looked at him. You bought your way out. White adjusted his shirt. I prefer to call it exercising my legal rights. Harleen shook her head. Just because you can afford the best lawyers doesn't mean you're innocent. White smiled. I never said I was. The guard unlocked the door. White walked toward it. Before leaving, he looked back at Harleen. Doctor, yes? You should learn something about Gotham. Harleen waited. White smiled. Everyone has a price. Then he walked away. Harleen watched him leave. She looked down at her notes and wrote, "Subject released immediately following interview. Significant financial resources and legal influence appear to have contributed to his release." She closed the file. Outside the prison, Warren White stepped into a waiting car. The door shut. The car drove away, and the man Gotham had started calling Great White Shark was back on the streets.